When respected retired Judge Dr. James Wilson faces discrimination at a prestigious hospital, he never imagines it will spark a battle for healthcare justice. A system designed to prioritize patients based on profit rather than medical need. A dedicated daughter who uncovers a nationwide pattern of discrimination. A corrupt administrator who believes healthcare is just a business. Witness the shocking confrontation as Tanya Wilson reveals her true identity in the hospital boardroom, leaving executives stunned when they discover she's one of the nation's top healthcare attorneys. Follow this powerful story of dignity, justice, and systemic change as father and daughter expose a corporation's scheme to deny proper treatment to elderly minority patients. Would you fight the system if your loved one's life was at stake? Like, comment, and share your thoughts below. And for more compelling stories of justice prevailing against all odds, subscribe to our channel. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Dr. James Wilson's meticulously maintained garden as he carefully pruned his prized roses. At 72, his movements were deliberate but precise, the same measured approach he had applied throughout his distinguished 35-year career as a federal judge. The morning air carried a slight chill, reminding him that winter would soon arrive in the quiet suburb of Oak Ridge. "James, don't forget your appointment at 2 p.m., called Martha from the porch, her voice warm but tinged with the concern that had become familiar since his heart condition diagnosis 3 years ago. "Already marked it in my calendar, dear," he responded, tapping the sleek watch on his wrist, a retirement gift from his colleagues at the federal courthouse. "Dr. Reynolds wants to review those test results." James carefully placed his gardening tools in their designated spots inside the shed. Organization had always been his strength, both in the courtroom and at home. The garage held shelves of meticulously labeled case files from landmark decisions he'd presided over throughout the years, civil rights violations, corporate fraud, environmental protection cases, all preserved as personal reminders of his life's work upholding justice. Inside their modest but elegant home, framed photographs chronicled their life together. James in his judicial robes at his swearing-in ceremony, Martha receiving her doctorate in literature, their daughter Tanya's law school graduation, family vacations to the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone. Each image captured moments of a life built on principles of dignity, education, and service. After washing up, James settled at the kitchen table where Martha had prepared his heart-healthy breakfast, oatmeal with fresh berries, a side of almonds, and green tea. His daily medications waited in a small pill organizer labeled with the days of the week. "Tanya called while you were outside," Martha mentioned, joining him at the table. "Her case in Boston wraps up tomorrow. She's planning to visit this weekend." James nodded, his expression brightening. "Good timing. I've been reviewing that healthcare legislation she asked about, found some interesting precedents that might help her current work." Their daughter had followed in his footsteps in pursuing law, but had chosen healthcare justice as her specialty. While he had administered the law from the bench, Tanya fought in the trenches, representing vulnerable patients against powerful medical institutions. Their approaches differed, but the core values remained the same: equal justice under law. The phone rang, interrupting their breakfast. Martha answered, exchanging pleasantries before passing the handset to James. "It's Ted from the community center." "James, we're in a bind," said Ted, his voice urgent. "Our speaker for today's youth mentorship program canceled. Any chance you could fill in? These kids need to hear from someone like you." Despite his busy day ahead, James didn't hesitate. "What time do you need me there?" 11 a.m. until noon. Just an hour of your wisdom is all we're asking." "I'll be there," James promised, already mentally rearranging his day to accommodate this commitment. After hanging up, he caught Martha's knowing smile. "You never could say no to those kids," she said. "Someone invested in me when I was young," he replied, his mind briefly traveling back to 1968 when a mentor had encouraged him to pursue law despite the obstacles facing a young black man at that time. "Just passing it forward." By 10:45 a.m., James arrived at the Oak Ridge Community Center, his posture straight and dignified as he walked through the doors. Young volunteers greeted him with obvious respect, several addressing him as Judge Wilson despite his retirement years earlier. The community room filled quickly with teenagers, most from underserved neighborhoods in the city. James recognized several faces from previous mentorship sessions. "Today we're fortunate to have Dr. James Wilson speaking with us," Ted announced to the group. For those who don't know, Judge Wilson served on the federal bench for over 3 decades and has ruled on some of the most significant civil rights cases in our state's history. James approached the podium, surveying the young faces before him. Unlike the courtroom, where formality prevailed, here he could speak directly, personally. "When I was your age," he began, his resonant voice commanding attention without raising its volume, "someone told me the law wasn't meant for people who looked like me, that I didn't belong in courtrooms except as a defendant. He paused, letting his words sink in. That person was wrong. The law belongs to all of us, but only if we have the courage to claim it. For the next hour, he shared stories from his career, carefully selecting examples that demonstrated both the flaws and potential of the justice system. He spoke about his landmark ruling against housing discrimination in 1987, his controversial decision protecting environmental regulations in coal country, and the death penalty case that still haunted him 20 years later. As the session concluded, a teenage girl raised her hand. "Sir, with everything wrong in the system, how did you not get bitter?" James considered the question carefully. "Bitterness is a luxury those seeking justice cannot afford," he answered finally. "Change doesn't come from anger alone, but from persistent, strategic action. The system has flaws because people created it. People can fix it too, people like you." After answering several more questions, James checked his watch 12:30 p.m. He needed to head home, take his medication, and prepare for his 2 p.m. appointment at Westlake Medical Center. His heart condition, while stable, required vigilant monitoring. On the drive home, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Tanya. He activated the hands-free system. "Dad, slight change of plans," his daughter's voice came through, sounding tired but determined. "The closing arguments went faster than expected. I'm at the airport now, should be there by dinner time." "That's wonderful news," James replied, genuine pleasure in his voice. "Everything go well in court." "We won, Dad," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Full compensation for the patients and implementation of new safety protocols." "Never doubted you for a moment," he said proudly, turning onto their street. "We'll celebrate tonight." As he parked in the driveway, James felt a momentary tightness in his chest, nothing severe, just a reminder of his condition. The upcoming appointment at Westlake was important. Dr. Reynolds had mentioned potentially adjusting his medication based on recent test results. Little did he know that this routine medical appointment would set in motion events that would challenge everything he believed about justice, privilege, and the institutions he had trusted throughout his distinguished career. At 1:30 p.m., Dr. James Wilson pulled into the sprawling parking lot of Westlake Medical Center, a gleaming 6-story structure of glass and steel that stood as the region's premier healthcare facility. He had been coming here for his cardiac care for over 5 years, ever since Dr. Reynolds had taken him on as a patient. The hospital had recently undergone a management change, but James expected the same professional care he had always received. He checked in at the front desk at precisely 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before his scheduled appointment, as he always did. The receptionist, a young woman he didn't recognize, glanced at her computer screen with a slight frown. "Dr. Wilson, I don't see you in the system," she said, tapping at her keyboard. "I have a 2 p.m. appointment with Dr. Reynolds," James replied calmly, reaching into his jacket pocket for the appointment card. "Here's the confirmation." The receptionist examined the card and typed again. "Oh, I see the issue. Your appointment was moved to our system under Wilson J instead of Dr. Wilson. Please take a seat and we'll call you when the doctor is ready." James nodded and found a seat in the waiting area. He pulled out his reading glasses and opened the medical journal he had brought along, settling in for what he expected would be a brief wait. By 2:30 p.m. he was still waiting. Several patients who had arrived after him had already been called back. James approached the desk again, maintaining his composed demeanor. "Excuse me, but my appointment was for 2 p.m. I've been waiting for 30 minutes now." The receptionist gave him a cursory glance. "The doctor is running behind schedule today. We'll call you when it's your turn." At 3 p.m., with no update and his chest beginning to feel uncomfortably tight from sitting so long, James approached the desk a third time. This time, a different staff member was there, a man in his 40s wearing an expensive suit with a name badge reading Marcus Sinclair, Administrative Director. "Sir, I've been waiting for my appointment for over an hour now," James explained. "I take medication that needs to be timed with my meals and medical consultations." Marcus Sinclair looked up from the computer with barely concealed impatience. "We're dealing with several priority cases today, sir. You'll need to wait your turn like everyone else." "I understand the nature of medical emergencies," James replied evenly, drawing on decades of courtroom composure. "However, I noticed several patients who arrived after me have already been seen. Our scheduling system prioritizes cases based on medical necessity," Sinclair responded dismissively. "If you're feeling unwell, perhaps you should visit urgent care instead." A young nurse named Sarah, who had been organizing files nearby, looked up with concern. "Mr. Sinclair, Dr. Wilson is one of Dr. Reynolds' established cardiac patients. His case does have priority coding in our system." Sinclair shot her a sharp look. "Nurse Miller, please return to your assigned duties. I'm handling this situation." James noticed the interaction but maintained his focus on the matter at hand. "I simply require the appointment I scheduled. If Dr. Reynolds is unavailable, perhaps another physician could review my test results." "Fine," Sinclair said curtly. Nurse Miller, since you're so concerned, take Mr. Wilson to exam room 3. I'll have Dr. Patel see him when available. It's Dr. Wilson, Sarah corrected quietly as she gathered his file. The doctor title is reserved for medical staff in this facility, Sinclair replied coldly. James followed Sarah to the examination room, his displeasure contained but evident in his measured steps. Once inside, the nurse took his vitals with professional efficiency. I apologize for the wait, Dr. Wilson, she said, recording his elevated blood pressure. Things have been different since the new management took over. I've noticed, James replied simply. At 3:45 p.m., Dr. Patel, a young physician James had never met before, finally entered the room. He appeared harried and unprepared, glancing at James' file for the first time as he entered. Mr. Wilson, I see you're here for. He flipped through the pages quickly. I'm Dr. Wilson, James corrected politely. I'm here to review my cardiac test results with Dr. Reynolds and discuss potential medication adjustments. Dr. Reynolds isn't available. I'll be covering, Dr. Patel replied, still scanning the file. Your tests show some minor abnormalities, but nothing concerning. Continue your current medications. Dr. Reynolds mentioned specifically that we might need to adjust my beta blockers based on these results, James said. Could we review the actual numbers together? Dr. Patel glanced at his watch. The consensus of our cardiac team is that your current regimen is sufficient. If you experience any acute symptoms, please go to the emergency room. Without further discussion, Dr. Patel closed the file and left the room, the entire consultation lasting less than 5 minutes. As James gathered his belongings, Sarah returned with his discharge papers. Dr. Wilson, she said quietly, this isn't how we usually operate. If you have concerns, there's a patient advocacy office on the first floor. James thanked her for the information, his judicial mind already cataloging the irregularities he had witnessed. Something had changed at Westlake Medical Center, and as he drove home with his cardiac concerns essentially unaddressed, he couldn't help but wonder if what he experienced was an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern. The next morning, James sat at his desk reviewing his medical records. Years of judicial work had instilled in him a methodical approach to fact-finding. He had requested his complete file from Westlake Medical Center last year and now compared the treatment notes from yesterday's appointment with his previous visits. The contrast was striking. Previous consultations detailed specific test values, medication discussions, and treatment plans spanning several pages. Yesterday's notes contained 3 sentences. This isn't right, he muttered, reaching for his phone to call Dr. Reynolds directly. After navigating an automated system, he reached the doctor's voicemail. Dr. Reynolds, this is James Wilson. I had an appointment yesterday but was seen by Dr. Patel instead. The consultation was inadequate. Please call me regarding my test results and medication adjustments you previously mentioned. While waiting for a callback, James began researching the recent management changes at Westlake. Online articles detailed the acquisition by Health First Partners, a private equity firm specializing in healthcare optimization. Their CEO, Richard Hampton, was quoted praising Marcus Sinclair's appointment. His expertise in streamlining operations will transform Westlake into a model of efficiency. At 11 a.m., James received a call not from Dr. Reynolds, but from Westlake's automated system confirming his next appointment, scheduled for 3 months later. This is unacceptable, he told Martha, who watched with growing concern. Dr. Reynolds specifically said we needed to adjust my medication within weeks, not months. Should I call Tanya? Martha asked. She'll be here this evening, but she could make some calls now. Not yet, James replied. Let's try the proper channels first. Following Nurse Sarah's advice, James drove back to Westlake and located the patient advocacy office, a small room near the cafeteria. Inside, a middle-aged woman introduced herself as Patricia. I'd like to file a formal complaint about my care yesterday, James explained, describing the excessive wait, dismissive treatment, and inadequate consultation. Patricia listened, taking notes. I understand your frustration, Dr. Wilson. I'll need you to complete these forms. She handed him a stack of paperwork. Once submitted, the review process takes approximately 60 business days. 2 months for a complaint review. My medical needs can't wait that long. That's our standard procedure under the new administration, Patricia replied apologetically. I could mark it urgent, but that still means 30 days minimum. James completed the forms with judicial precision, detailing times, names, and specific statements. As he wrote, another elderly patient entered, a black woman using a walker. Mrs. Jenkins, good to see you again. Patricia greeted her with recognition that suggested multiple previous visits. James finished his paperwork but lingered, overhearing their conversation. They canceled my physical therapy again, Mrs. Jenkins explained. Said my insurance review wasn't complete, but I showed them the approval letter. James introduced himself to Mrs. Jenkins as they both left the advocacy office. I couldn't help overhearing your situation. I'm experiencing similar issues with Westlake. It started 3 months ago, Mrs. Jenkins explained as they walked slowly toward the exit. After the new management came in, suddenly my treatments were non-essential and appointments kept getting rescheduled. My neighbor Mrs. Davis had the same problem. She's also on Medicare supplemental insurance. Have you spoken with other patients about this? James asked, his analytical mind detecting a potential pattern. At my senior center, it's all anyone talks about. Seems like certain patients get priority while others keep getting pushed back. They exchanged phone numbers and James promised to stay in touch. Back home, James created a spreadsheet, meticulously documenting his own experience and the information from Mrs. Jenkins. His judicial training had taught him the value of establishing patterns through documented evidence. That afternoon, he called 5 members of his retirement association who also used Westlake. 3 reported similar experiences. All were elderly minority patients with Medicare or Medicare Advantage plans. 2 others, both white colleagues with private insurance, expressed surprise, reporting excellent prompt care from the same facility. By evening when Tanya arrived, James had compiled a preliminary analysis suggesting a disturbing pattern of disparate treatment based on race and insurance type. "Dad, you look tired," Tanya observed as she embraced him. "Have you been working on a case again?" "In a manner of speaking," he replied, "but first tell me about your victory in Boston." Over dinner, Tanya described her successful lawsuit against a pharmaceutical company that had failed to disclose critical side effects of their medications to lower-income patients. As she spoke, James recognized the same passion for justice that had driven his own career. "Now, what's this case you're working on?" she finally asked. James explained yesterday's appointment and his subsequent investigation. "I've identified 17 patients so far with similar experiences, predominantly elderly minorities on Medicare." Tanya's expression grew increasingly concerned. "This sounds like systematic discrimination. Have you reviewed your medical billing too?" "Not yet. Why?" "In my recent cases, I've seen medical facilities implementing efficiency protocols that essentially ration care based on projected revenue per patient. Some call it patient prioritization, but it's discrimination disguised as business optimization." James pulled out his recent billing statements, comparing them with older ones. The billing codes have changed. Same treatments but different classifications. Tanya examined the documents with professional scrutiny. "They're upcoding your basic visits while downcoding your specialist treatments. The first increases what you pay, the second decreases what they provide. It's subtle but potentially fraudulent." As they spoke, James felt a sudden sharp pain in his chest. He reached for his medication, but his hand trembled. "Dad," Tanya's voice rose in alarm. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Just need my medication," he managed, pointing toward the kitchen. Martha rushed to retrieve his pills while Tanya helped him to the couch. The pain subsided after taking the medication, but the incident left him shaken. "This is exactly why proper medical care matters," Tanya said firmly. "What they're doing isn't just unfair, it's dangerous." James nodded, his resolve strengthening despite his physical weakness. "I spent my career ensuring equal protection under the law. I never expected to fight for equal protection under medical care at this age." "You don't have to fight alone," Tanya replied, determination hardening her features. "I think it's time I look into Westlake Medical Center's practices myself." Tanya Wilson woke early the morning after her arrival, her legal mind already formulating a structured approach to investigating Westlake Medical Center. At 6 a.m., she sat at her father's desk, her laptop open to a secure document titled Westlake Investigation Preliminary Assessment. James found her there an hour later, surrounded by medical bills, insurance statements, and legal reference materials. "You should be resting after your Boston case," he said, setting a cup of coffee beside her. "I reviewed your spreadsheet last night," Tanya replied, gesturing to her organized notes. "This isn't an isolated incident, Dad. Your documentation shows a statistically significant pattern of disparate treatment." James nodded, taking a seat across from her. "My judicial instincts suspected as much, but I needed more evidence." "Your methodology was impeccable," Tanya acknowledged with professional respect. "I've already initiated 3 lines of inquiry based on your work." She turned her laptop to show him a structured investigation plan. WSDLAKE Investigation Action ITEMS 1. Data collection, patient treatment records, focus on appointment wait times, billing code modifications, pre-post management change, insurance processing timelines by demographic 2. Witness identification, current former staff with direct knowledge, patients with documented treatment disparities, insurance representatives handling claim patterns 3. Regulatory framework, Medicare compliance requirements, state healthcare discrimination statutes, federal civil rights applications to healthcare. I recognize this approach, James said with a slight smile, similar to how I structured complex case preparation. I learned from the best, Tanya replied, but I'm adding something you couldn't do from the bench: direct field investigation. Tanya explained her plan to visit Westlake that day not as James Wilson's daughter or as an attorney, but as a concerned relative gathering information. They don't know me there, that gives us an advantage. Be careful, James cautioned. Marcus Sinclair seems particularly adept at deflection. Trust me, Dad, deflection is what I deal with daily from pharmaceutical companies and hospital administrators. It's practically my specialty. At 10 a.m., Tanya arrived at Westlake Medical Center dressed in casual clothes rather than her usual professional attire. She observed the waiting room dynamics for 30 minutes, noting which patients were taken promptly and which waited extended periods. The pattern aligned with her father's documentation. Elderly minority patients consistently experienced longer waits. She approached the reception desk with a practiced, non-threatening demeanor. "Hi, I'm checking on the heart health education programs for my father. He's a patient of Dr. Reynolds." The receptionist pointed her toward a wall of brochures. "All our patient education materials are there." As Tanya browsed the materials, she strategically positioned herself near the nurse's station, overhearing conversations about scheduling and patient prioritization. "Mr. Hampton's 11 a.m. just canceled. Should I move up Mrs. Washington, who's been waiting since 9? Asked one nurse. "No, Mr. Sinclair's directive is clear," replied another. "Gold-tier patients fill cancellation slots first. Put in Mr. Peterson from tomorrow's schedule." Tanya discreetly noted this exchange, continuing her casual observation while collecting brochures. When she spotted Nurse Sarah, whom her father had mentioned, heading toward the break room, Tanya followed. "Excuse me," Tanya said, approaching Sarah in the relatively private hallway. "I'm wondering if I could ask about cardiac care for elderly patients." Sarah responded professionally but cautiously. "Of course, what information do you need?" "My father, Dr. James Wilson, mentioned you were helpful during his recent appointment," Tanya said, watching recognition dawn in Sarah's eyes. "Oh, Dr. Wilson, yes, I remember him." Sarah glanced around before continuing more quietly. "Is he feeling better? His treatment wasn't standard procedure." "That's actually why I'm here," Tanya replied, keeping her voice low. "Have you noticed any patterns in how certain patients are treated?" Sarah's expression confirmed what Tanya suspected. The nurse had observed the discrimination but felt powerless to address it. "I can't really discuss that here." Tanya handed her a business card with only her personal number. "If you ever want to talk about healthcare best practices, I'd appreciate your professional insights." Sarah examined the card, recognition flickering in her eyes at Tanya's name. "You're his daughter," the healthcare attorney. "Yes, but today I'm just a concerned daughter," Tanya replied calmly. "Nothing more." After leaving Sarah, Tanya visited the hospital's billing department, requesting clarification on her father's recent statements. The financial counselor explained the new tiered care model implemented by Health First partners. "Patients are categorized based on comprehensive value assessment," the counselor explained. "Treatment protocols are optimized accordingly." "And how is value determined?" Tanya asked innocently. "Multiple factors: insurance type, treatment response probability, resource utilization rates." "Is age or race factored into these assessments?" The counselor stiffened. "Absolutely not. That would be discriminatory and illegal." "Of course," Tanya agreed pleasantly while noting the defensive response. Back in her car, Tanya called a colleague at the state medical board. "Jeff, I need information on Health First partners and their acquisition of Westlake Medical Center. Specifically, any complaints filed regarding their patient prioritization systems." By evening, Tanya had compiled substantial preliminary evidence suggesting Westlake was implementing a discriminatory care model disguised as healthcare optimization. She presented her findings to her parents over dinner. "They've created an algorithmic approach to discrimination," she explained. "The system flags patients by insurance type, then applies additional resource allocation factors that correlate strongly with race and age." "Plausible deniability," James observed. "They never explicitly state race as a factor, but the outcome achieves the same result." "Exactly, it's healthcare redlining," Tanya agreed, "and I found 7 former employees who left after the new policies were implemented. 3 have agreed to speak with me confidentially." Martha looked worried. "What about James's heart condition? He needs proper care now, not after a lengthy investigation." "Already handled," Tanya assured her. "I've arranged an appointment with Dr. Harmon at University Medical Center tomorrow. She's a leading cardiologist who's testified in several of my cases." James reached for his wife's hand. "I'm more concerned about all the other patients without a daughter like Tanya. They deserve proper care too." "That's why we're not stopping at getting you treatment elsewhere," Tanya said, determination evident in her voice. "We're going to build a case that changes the system for everyone." Later that night, Tanya received a text message from an unknown number. This is Sarah from Westlake. There's more happening than you know. I have documentation. Can we meet tomorrow? The investigation had officially begun. At 7 a.m. the following morning, Tanya met Sarah Miller at a small cafe 10 miles from Westlake Medical Center. The nurse arrived wearing sunglasses despite the overcast day, nervously scanning the room before taking a seat across from Tanya. I appreciate you meeting me, Tanya began, sliding a cup of coffee toward Sarah. Everything we discuss is confidential. Sarah removed her sunglasses, revealing tired eyes. I've worked at Westlake for 8 years. What's happening there now isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. She placed a USB drive on the table. These are internal documents I've been gathering: patient classification protocols, schedule prioritization algorithms, and billing code modification directives. This is significant evidence, Tanya said, keeping her voice measured despite her excitement at the potential breakthrough. What prompted you to document this? Mrs. Alina Jenkins, Sarah replied. She was a cardiac patient, similar profile to your father. Her appointments kept getting rescheduled, medications adjusted without proper consultation. She died 3 weeks ago from complications that could have been prevented with standard care. Tanya took careful notes as Sarah detailed the implementation of what Westlake internally called the Patient Value Optimization Protocol. The system assigned each patient a numeric score based on insurance type, projected lifetime value, resource requirements, and demographic factors labeled as community representation metrics. The algorithm never explicitly mentions race or age, Sarah explained, but the correlation is undeniable in its application. Patients like your father are systematically deprioritized. Who designed this system? Tanya asked. Marcus Sinclair implemented it, but the framework came directly from Health First partners. It's being piloted at Westlake before rollout to their other 17 facilities nationwide. By the time they finished, Tanya had documented 37 specific protocol violations and identified 11 additional potential witnesses. Before leaving, Sarah provided one final crucial detail. The hospital board meets tomorrow at 2 p.m. They don't know the full extent of what's happening. Sinclair provides them with filtered data. Armed with this information and the USB drive's contents, Tanya spent the day preparing a comprehensive presentation while her father attended his appointment with Dr. Harmon at University Medical Center. Dr. Harmon confirmed what we suspected, James told Tanya that evening. My medication should have been adjusted weeks ago. She's prescribed a new regimen that should stabilize my condition. I'm glad you're getting proper care, Tanya replied. Meanwhile, I've analyzed Sarah's documents. The discriminatory pattern is even more systematic than we thought. She showed her father the evidence: spreadsheets of patient classifications, internal memos about resource optimization, and financial projections showing increased profits directly correlated with reduced care for certain patient demographics. This violates multiple state and federal regulations, Tanya explained. But confronting them requires strategic timing. We need to separate the board from Sinclair's influence. The board meeting tomorrow provides that opportunity, James noted. Exactly, I've requested a 10-minute slot to discuss patient experience improvements. They've approved it, likely assuming I'm proposing some minor suggestion. What's your approach? Asked Martha, concern evident in her voice. A controlled revelation, Tanya replied. I'll present as a concerned daughter initially, then strategically reveal my legal background only after establishing the evidence. The goal isn't immediate legal action, but to create internal pressure for systemic change. The following day, Tanya arrived at Westlake Medical Center dressed in professional attire, carrying a sleek presentation folder. The hospital board, 12 members including physicians, business leaders, and community representatives, assembled in the executive conference room. Marcus Sinclair nodded curtly as she entered. Ms. Wilson, you have 10 minutes to present your patient experience suggestions. Thank you, Mr. Sinclair, Tanya replied pleasantly. I'm here regarding my father, Dr. James Wilson, and his recent experiences at Westlake. She began methodically detailing her father's treatment, presenting it initially as a single case study of patient care deficiencies. Several board members appeared genuinely concerned. While my father's experience was troubling, Tanya continued, further investigation suggests it represents a systematic pattern rather than an isolated incident. She distributed folders containing anonymized patient data showing clear disparities in wait times, treatment protocols, and billing practices correlated with race, age, and insurance type. Ms. Wilson, these are confidential internal documents, Sinclair interrupted, his composed facade cracking slightly. Where did you obtain this information? The source is protected, Tanya replied calmly, but the data's authenticity can be verified independently. Dr. Jameson, the chief of medicine, examined the documents with growing alarm. These discrepancies are concerning if accurate. We should investigate further. These are clearly manipulated statistics, Sinclair countered. Ms. Wilson has no medical background to interpret clinical prioritization protocols. Actually, Tanya replied, finally revealing her full identity, I'm Tanya Wilson, healthcare attorney specializing in medical discrimination cases. I've successfully litigated 12 similar cases, including Jensen v. Memorial Health, which established precedent for algorithmic discrimination in healthcare settings. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Board members exchanged concerned glances while Sinclair's expression hardened. Furthermore, Tanya continued, displaying the final slide of her presentation, I've identified 37 specific violations of Medicare regulations, state healthcare equality statutes, and federal civil rights protections in Westlake's current patient management system. This is preposterous, Sinclair interjected, his composure now visibly fracturing. You're making baseless accusations to secure preferential treatment for your father. My father is now receiving appropriate care elsewhere, Tanya countered. I'm here because numerous other patients without healthcare attorneys as family members continue to suffer under these discriminatory practices. She played a brief audio recording from the USB drive, Sinclair instructing staff to optimize resource allocation away from low-yield demographic segments. That recording was obtained illegally, Sinclair declared, standing abruptly. It was provided by a whistleblower protected under state and federal statutes, Tanya replied, one of 17 staff members who have documented similar directives. Dr. Jameson turned to Sinclair. Is this accurate? Have you implemented patient prioritization based on demographic factors? Of course not, Sinclair responded defensively. We use comprehensive value-based metrics that optimize resource allocation. Those metrics, Tanya interjected, correlate with race and age at a statistically significant level of 0.87, well above the 0.7 threshold established in Thompson v. Lakeside Medical as evidence of discriminatory impact. For the next 20 minutes, well beyond her allocated time, Tanya methodically presented evidence of systematic discrimination disguised as business optimization. Board members asked increasingly pointed questions, with several physicians expressing particular concern about medical ethics violations. We should suspend these protocols immediately pending investigation, suggested Dr. Carter, a cardiologist who had treated James previously. That would be a costly overreaction, Sinclair argued. Health First Partners has implemented similar systems across multiple facilities with excellent financial results. At what human cost? Asked Dr. Jameson. If these allegations are substantiated, we face significant liability and, more importantly, have violated our fundamental oath to provide equal care. As the meeting concluded, the board voted 10-2 to establish an independent review committee and temporarily suspend the patient classification system pending investigation. Sinclair cornered Tanya as she left the conference room. You've made a serious mistake, he said quietly. Health First Partners has considerable resources and influence. This won't end well for you or your father. Tanya met his gaze steadily. Threats against whistleblowers and their advocates constitute additional violations, Mr. Sinclair. Would you like to add that to the record? As she walked away, Tanya knew this was merely the opening move in what would likely become a complex legal battle. Her father had taught her that justice required not just evidence but strategic persistence. The confrontation had been won, but the war for healthcare equality at Westlake Medical Center was just beginning. 2 days after the board meeting, Westlake Medical Center erupted into a flurry of activity. An independent auditing team arrived to examine patient records. Security footage captured staff removing documents from administrative offices at night, and nervous whispers circulated among employees about imminent changes. Tanya monitored these developments while methodically building her case. In the Wilson home, the dining room had transformed into a command center. Legal references, medical records, and witness statements covered the table while 3 laptops tracked different aspects of the investigation. Health First Partners has engaged Thornton and Associates, Tanya informed her father as she reviewed a notification from the court. They're bringing in their top healthcare defense team. James nodded, recognizing the firm's reputation. They specialize in regulatory obstruction, delaying tactics, and procedural complexity to exhaust opponents' resources. Exactly what I expected, Tanya replied, sorting documents into categorical evidence folders. They've filed a motion to dismiss whistleblower protections for our sources, claiming HIPAA violations in data collection. A predictable first move, James observed. Discredit the evidence by attacking its acquisition rather than addressing its substance. Martha entered with coffee, surveying the organized chaos with concern. The hospital called. They've scheduled an urgent care review for all patients in your demographic category. Apparently, the board's suspension of Sinclair's protocols triggered automatic reassessment. A positive development, Tanya noted, adding this information to her timeline. It indicates the board is taking concrete action despite the legal maneuvering. Her phone rang, the medical board investigator she had contacted earlier. Ms. Wilson, we've initiated a preliminary review based on your documentation. The evidence warrants formal investigation into Westlake's patient classification practices. This official involvement represented a significant advancement. While administrative investigations moved slower than court proceedings, they carried substantial regulatory weight and couldn't be easily dismissed by corporate legal teams. That afternoon, Tanya received an encrypted email from Sarah containing internal communications revealing Sinclair's response to the board's decision: temporary compliance while maintaining core optimization framework, adjust terminology and documentation to remove statistical correlation markers. They're not abandoning the discriminatory system, Tanya explained to her parents. They're merely disguising it better while preparing their defense. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Martha answered to find an impeccably dressed courier delivering a thick envelope. Legal service for Tanya Wilson, he announced formally. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Health First Partners, threatening legal action for defamation, interference with business relationships, and misappropriation of proprietary healthcare management protocols. Standard intimidation tactics, Tanya remarked, unfazed. They're hoping to pressure us into abandoning the case before formal proceedings begin. James examined the document with judicial scrutiny. The language suggests they're more concerned about public exposure than legal liability. Their primary fear is precedent that could affect their other facilities. This insight shaped Tanya's strategy moving forward. Rather than pursuing immediate injunctive relief focused solely on Westlake, she expanded her approach to address Health First's entire patient value optimization protocol system across all 17 facilities. The following week brought another development. Local media caught wind of the investigation. The Morning Herald ran a front-page story titled "Prestigious Hospital Accused of Patient Discrimination." The article, while carefully avoiding direct allegations, detailed concerning patterns in treatment prioritization and mentioned an ongoing regulatory investigation. Sinclair's response was immediate and aggressive. He held a press conference portraying Westlake as the victim of unsubstantiated claims by a single disgruntled family leveraging legal connections to secure preferential treatment. "They've played directly into our strategy," Tanya noted as they watched the press conference. "By publicly denying specific practices, they've opened the door for factual refutation using our evidence." She drafted a detailed press statement citing anonymized statistical data demonstrating the discriminatory impact of Westlake's protocols. Rather than releasing it immediately, however, she shared it confidentially with key board members, including Dr. Jameson and Dr. Carter, who had shown genuine concern during her presentation. "Before this becomes a public relations war," her message explained, "consider whether transparent reform might better serve both patients and the hospital's reputation." This calculated pressure yielded results. The board called an emergency session and invited Tanya to present a comprehensive overview of the discrimination evidence. 3 additional whistleblowers from Westlake's administrative staff attended, providing first-hand testimony about implementation directives. Following this session, the board voted 11-1 to place Marcus Sinclair on administrative leave pending investigation outcomes and to permanently discontinue the patient classification system. Health First Partners responded by sending a senior executive team to reassert operational protocols at Westlake. Their arrival coincided with a coordinated legal counteroffensive: subpoenas for all of Tanya's evidence, motions to seal case records as proprietary business information, and formal complaints to the state bar questioning her investigative methods. "They're escalating because we're winning," Tanya explained during a strategy session with her father. "Their legal bombardment is designed to overwhelm us with procedural requirements while they implement a modified version of the same discriminatory system." James, drawing on decades of judicial experience, helped her prioritize responses to maintain momentum despite these obstacles. Focus on the regulatory investigations rather than their civil complaints. Administrative proceedings are less susceptible to procedural delays and provide access to their internal documents through regulatory discovery. This approach proved effective. The state medical board's investigation gained access to Health First's complete patient classification algorithms across all facilities, revealing consistent discriminatory patterns disguised as resource optimization. As the investigation expanded, 17 additional patients came forward with experiences similar to James's. Tanya organized these testimonies into a compelling narrative of systematic discrimination, supplemented by statistical analysis demonstrating disparate impact. 6 weeks into the legal battle, Westlake's lawyers requested a confidential settlement meeting. Tanya arrived prepared for standard delay tactics, but found instead a surprising development: internal division among the defendants. Hospital board members, concerned about both liability and their ethical obligations, had begun distancing themselves from Health First Partners' directives. "We're willing to implement comprehensive reforms," Dr. Jameson explained during the meeting, including transparent scheduling protocols, independent oversight of patient prioritization, and remediation for affected patients. Health First's legal team immediately objected, insisting any settlement include non-disclosure provisions and no admission of wrongdoing. Their primary concern remained preventing precedent that could affect their other facilities. Tanya recognized this division as a critical opportunity. Full remediation requires addressing the systematic problem, not just its manifestation at Westlake, she countered. Health First must discontinue this discriminatory framework at all 17 facilities and submit to compliance monitoring. The negotiations deadlocked on this point, but the rift between Westlake's medical leadership and Health First's corporate management had widened irreparably. When Dr. Carter subsequently disclosed that similar investigations had begun at 3 other Health First facilities based on Westlake whistleblower evidence, the corporation's bargaining position weakened significantly. As pressure mounted from multiple regulatory bodies, news media, and internal dissent, Health First made a final attempt to contain the damage. They offered Tanya a substantial settlement for her father's case alone, with strict confidentiality provisions. "They're still missing the point," James said when Tanya discussed this offer. "This was never about my individual treatment. It's about ensuring all patients receive equal care regardless of their demographic profile or insurance type." Tanya agreed, rejecting the offer and proceeding with preparations for formal hearings before the State Medical Board and Center for Medicare Services. The stage was set for a definitive confrontation that would determine not just Westlake's future, but potentially establish precedent for healthcare equality across the entire system. The State Medical Board hearing began at 9 a.m. on a crisp autumn morning, precisely 3 months after James Wilson's initial discriminatory experience at Westlake. The hearing room, designed with formal authority reminiscent of a courtroom, filled quickly with stakeholders from all sides of the case. Tanya arrived early to organize her presentation materials, accompanied by her father, whose health had stabilized under Dr. Harmon's appropriate care. James observed the proceedings with judicial detachment, noting the strategic positioning of the various legal teams. Health First Partners had assembled an imposing defense. 5 attorneys from Thornton and Associates flanked by healthcare consultants and data analysts. Marcus Sinclair sat rigidly among them, his expression betraying tension despite his carefully maintained professional appearance. At precisely 9:05 a.m., Dr. Elaine Morrison, chair of the medical board, called the hearing to order. This investigative proceeding will examine evidence regarding alleged discriminatory patient treatment protocols at Westlake Medical Center and potentially other Health First Partners facilities. The board's independent counsel presented preliminary findings from their investigation: statistical analysis confirming disparate treatment patterns, internal documents detailing the patient classification system, and testimony from both patients and whistleblowers. This foundation established, Tanya was invited to present her comprehensive case. The evidence will demonstrate that Health First Partners implemented a systematic framework designed to prioritize patients based on financial yield rather than medical necessity, Tanya began, her voice steady and authoritative. While ostensibly presented as resource optimization, this system consistently deprioritized elderly minority patients, particularly those with Medicare coverage. For the next 2 hours, she methodically presented evidence from multiple sources: patient data showing statistically significant disparities in wait times and treatment protocols, internal communications revealing explicit directives to reduce resources for low-yield demographic segments, testimony from 17 patients who experienced similar discrimination. And most damaging, Health First's complete algorithmic framework revealing how seemingly neutral factors created a clearly discriminatory impact. The system was mathematically designed to disadvantage certain patients while maintaining plausible deniability, Tanya explained, displaying the algorithmic weights assigned to various patient characteristics. These weights, when applied collectively, created a 0.91 correlation with race and age, far exceeding the 0.7 threshold established as discriminatory in precedent cases. Dr. Morrison interrupted. Ms. Wilson, can you clarify how this system was implemented across multiple facilities? Our jurisdiction covers Westlake specifically, but there are broader implications here. Health First's corporate documentation confirms this as a pilot program at Westlake before planned implementation across all 17 facilities, Tanya replied, displaying internal strategic plans. 3 other facilities had begun early implementation phases before our investigation prompted temporary suspension. When Health First's lead attorney rose for cross-examination, his approach focused on technical defenses rather than factual disputes. These complex medical decisions require prioritization frameworks that laypersons might misinterpret as discriminatory, he argued. Healthcare resource allocation necessarily involves difficult decisions that may appear disproportionate when viewed without clinical context. Tanya countered with testimony from Westlake's own physicians, including Dr. Carter and Dr. Reynolds, who confirmed the classification system frequently contradicted medical necessity determinations made by treating physicians. The algorithm overrode clinical judgment in 73% of cases involving minority Medicare patients, she demonstrated through physician documentation. This wasn't medical prioritization, it was financial filtering disguised as clinical protocol. By mid-afternoon, Marcus Sinclair was called to testify. Initially composed, he presented the system as standard healthcare optimization implemented at numerous facilities nationwide. This facade cracked under questioning from board member Dr. Washington. Mr. Sinclair, internal emails show you specifically instructed staff to minimize resource allocation to demographic categories with suboptimal financial yield. Could you explain how this directive aligns with equal medical treatment obligations? Sinclair's response revealed the core justification. Healthcare is fundamentally a business. Appropriate resource allocation requires prioritizing patients with optimal return on investment. The room fell silent at this explicit admission. To clarify, Dr. Morrison asked, you're confirming that patient treatment priority was based on financial return rather than medical necessity. Sinclair attempted to backtrack, but his previous statement had been unambiguous. The remaining testimony merely reinforced what had become evident. Health First had systematically implemented discrimination as a business strategy. At 4:30 p.m., Richard Hampton, CEO of Health First Partners, made an unexpected appearance with a new legal team. They requested a brief recess to explore resolution options that would serve all stakeholders effectively. Tanya recognized this tactical shift. Hampton had realized the case was unwinnable on its merits and was pivoting to damage control. During the recess, Health First's new counsel approached her with a comprehensive settlement proposal. Our client is prepared to implement substantial reforms, the attorney began, outlining a proposal that included policy changes at Westlake, financial compensation for affected patients, and enhanced oversight mechanisms. This addresses Westlake specifically, Tanya acknowledged, but not the systematic issue across all Health First facilities. After 30 minutes of negotiation, a framework emerged that Tanya could support: comprehensive reform of patient prioritization across all Health First facilities, independent monitoring with quarterly reporting for 3 years, financial remediation for all affected patients, termination of discriminatory algorithms with transparent replacement protocols, and establishment of a $20 million healthcare equality fund to support underserved patients. When the hearing reconvened, Dr. Morrison was informed of the proposed resolution. After reviewing its terms, the board voted to incorporate these provisions into a binding consent order with additional regulatory oversight requirements and mandatory reporting of compliance metrics. This resolution addresses not just past violations, but establishes preventive measures for the future, Dr. Morrison stated as she approved the agreement. The board will maintain active oversight to ensure full implementation. As the hearing concluded, James approached his daughter with evident pride. You've achieved something remarkable, systemic change rather than merely individual remedy. I had an excellent role model for pursuing justice systematically, Tanya replied, embracing her father. 2 weeks later, the Wilsons hosted a gathering for key participants in the case. Sarah and other whistleblowers attended, along with several patients whose experiences had supported the investigation. Dr. Carter represented Westlake's medical staff, bringing news that the hospital board had severed its management contract with Health First and appointed him interim medical director. We've implemented completely transparent scheduling and treatment protocols, he informed the group. Every patient now receives equal priority based solely on medical necessity. Mrs. Jenkins, whose initial conversation with James had helped establish the discrimination pattern, shared her experience from that morning's appointment at Westlake. The difference is remarkable. No extended waiting, complete consultation with my physician, and clear explanation of all treatment options. James, looking healthier than he had in months under proper medical care, raised his glass for a toast. To justice that extends beyond individual remedy to systemic change. And to those willing to stand up for what's right, added Sarah, who had recently been promoted to patient advocacy director at Westlake. Later that evening, as their guests departed, James reflected with Martha and Tanya on his judicial career and its connection to this case. Throughout my years on the bench, I understood that true justice requires more than correct legal outcomes in individual cases, he said thoughtfully. It demands addressing the underlying systems that create injustice. That's what makes this resolution significant, Tanya agreed. It doesn't just correct what happened at Westlake, it prevents similar discrimination at facilities nationwide. Martha squeezed her husband's hand. You spent your career establishing legal principles. Now Tanya has applied them to create practical change. As the evening concluded, a news alert appeared on Tanya's phone. Health First CEO Hampton resigns following healthcare discrimination settlement. The company's board statement pledged commitment to equitable treatment protocols that prioritize medical necessity above all other factors. It's just the beginning, Tanya noted, but an important one. Healthcare equality requires constant vigilance. James nodded in agreement. His unexpected journey from patient to catalyst for systemic change had come full circle. What began as personal discrimination had transformed into a precedent-setting case with implications for healthcare equality nationwide. More importantly, patients like Mrs. Jenkins would now receive the care they deserved, not based on their demographic profile or insurance type, but on their medical needs as human beings entitled to equal treatment under both law and medicine. The work of justice, James observed with the wisdom of his years, is never complete, but each step forward matters. Today we took a significant step.